Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Trauma Uncensored. I'm your host, Brooke Shearer. We've got another great episode for you today, which we will jump into shortly. If you're a regular listener of this podcast, thank you for your continued support. And if this is your first time listening, I'm so glad you found us. This podcast was created as a safe space for community, connection, resources, and support for anyone navigating trauma, grief, mental health, or pain. Here, your experiences are both valid and valued. Your story matters, and it's important to know you are not walking this path alone. It is my hope that each episode helps you feel more connected and reminds you that it is possible to not only live, but to truly thrive after hardship. Trauma Uncensored began as an extension of my own healing journey following immense trauma. The course of my life changed in the fall of 2015 and led to the tragic death of our 9-year-old son, Logan, in 2016 due to a distracted driver whose reckless choice behind the wheel led to the crash. In the time since Logan was taken from us, I have fought for my mental health and for my survival. That fight has led me down an unexpected path of discovery, healing, and recovery. It has given me the tools to sit here today and share these conversations with you. If you're new to the Trauma Uncensored podcast, I invite you to start with episode 1 titled The Crash. In that episode, I share the beginning of my story, which provides important context for the conversations and guest stories that follow. Speaking of guests, we believe our listeners' voices matter deeply, and we welcome those who wish to share their experiences. If interested, click on the submission link in our show notes below, email hello@traumauncensored.com, or reach out through any of our social platforms. Just be sure to include the word guest in your submission. All show information, resources, and links can also be found in the show notes. Be sure to follow us on our social media platforms and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. And if this podcast speaks to you, and I'm sure it will, we would truly appreciate you leaving a review. Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. This podcast discusses topics related to grief, loss, trauma, mental health challenges, survival, and more. While I have gained deep personal experience in these areas, I am not a therapist, and this show is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So stay tuned for another installment of Trauma Uncensored, where, as always, we're healing out loud.
Trauma Uncensored.
Trauma Uncensored.
Trauma Uncensored.
Hey, Tara.
Hi, Brooke.
It's so good to see your face. It's been a hot
You
minute.
too. It has.
So I decide, usually I don't wear sweatshirts on the show, but this one felt very appropriate for today. So I'm wearing my Tampa Bay Lightning shirt, and it's got the 07, that's the year Logan was born, and his name on the back. And we had him custom made the year, or in 2020 when the Lightning won the Stanley Cup. And you probably don't remember, but I have worn this numerous times sitting across from you. And so I just felt it very fitting today to wear this sweatshirt. So people listening who have been with us or been with the show for the duration since the beginning, I talk a lot about Tara, and I'm super excited today that everybody gets to hear her voice. And for those of you watching, get to actually see her face. Tara has been instrumental in my healing process, especially, we were just talking about this. I was started on August 1st of in residential treatment, August 1st of 2022. So I've known Tara now for 3.5 years, right? Does that math equate?
Yeah.
And I've worked with her. Yep. I worked with her both of my tours in residential trauma, and I've worked with her outside of residential trauma, and she's an amazing human. So as you get to listen to her, and if you go back and you listen to me talk about her, I will have her information in the show notes below, so you can reach out to her or access her if you find that you're interested in doing so. So Tara's story, I've known of Tara's story. I have not known it in extreme detail. Um, Tara and I were we worked a lot when I was in residential trauma on Logan's death. And what I didn't know while we were there, in fact, I didn't learn this until after I had left residential trauma, was that not quite a year prior, on September in September of 2021, her brother Cody died from an accidental fentanyl overdose. So I've thought about that a lot over the years. I mean, I knew by the time I was in residential trauma, the second time I knew about your brother. But in fact, I learned it from the group that I was in for a hot minute right before the trial in 2023. You had that group and you mentioned your brother, and I was like, oh my God, because you mentioned his site was right up from the office where we were sitting, and I had no idea until then. And it, I think about it a lot, and the fact that you were still fresh in your grief with your brother, and you working in residential trauma were able to hold space for all these people, but especially me in the pain of, losing my son. And you weren't single-handedly the one who helped me shift my vision of him. Like, you helped me learn that I was all those years seeing Logan as the body on the side of the road as opposed to the Logan with the light. And you were the one on his angel date in 2021, on September 15th of 2021. We did a huge session, and I tell people about it all the time, but that was the moment that I had the aha moment, that in that session that I had been referencing in my mind, in my body, Logan as the little boy who was dead on the side of the road, and all of those images versus who he was in his human life, the light. But to be able to do something like that for another human, all while you are deep in your grief. And obviously I can't empathize with you because I have not lost a sibling, and I can I can sympathize. I kind of like teeter that balance because I think a lot about you and Mallory. Actually, I see these similarities, and, the strength of wanting to help people while also still grieving, what is lost, but remembering that they're still here. And I know the information that I have about you definitely dives into that. So can you just start by telling us about your brother Cody, about your relationship, your upbringing, your background, and lead us into your story.
Yeah, thanks, Brooke. Those are some really interesting things to consider as you talk about it. Like, I'm thinking about how I showed up with you as a therapist after having had this personal experience in my life. And I definitely know that there's an overlap that is interesting to talk about, and not super a straight line and when I'm the therapist me. But I'm sure we could get into that as we talk more. But yeah, so I grew up in Nashville, born and raised here, with my two older brothers. They're 3 and 6 years older than I am. So, we're all sort of around the same age gap, but so kind of big chunks in between me and my oldest versus me and my middle brother. So Cody is my middle brother. And yeah, pretty like average middle class, family. Like, my grandparents were here, one within 5 minutes of my home, another was like more of an hour outside of town. Like, family was a big part of like raising us and being a part of our life. We had a lot of fun. We ran around outside. We played sports, like a lot of very typical, beautiful kind of childhood experiences. I was the youngest, and I was the girl. And I very much wanted to be a boy because I had 2 older brothers,
Mhm.
and I wanted to keep up with them, and I wanted to do all the, like, tough things. I wanted to be able to go to the bathroom outside like they could. Like, I wanted all of the privileges or the equality as they did, and I always say I really feel thankful, that I'm like, brothers are my siblings because I think I have this, like, toughness that and resilience that comes from that. They were loving and they messed with me.
I'm sure.
Like, it was all in good, clean, loving heart, but they antagonized in the way that, like, young boys do with younger girls. Um, and I didn't like all of it when I was younger, and it made me tough. And, like, I feel like also able to have a sense of humor about myself. And, like, there's just some really, like, some of my favorite parts of me, I feel like, came from being a younger sibling to 2 older brothers. My brothers were obviously closer in age, right? There's still a bit of a gap. They're like 2.5, 3 years in that range, age difference. Um, and they were closer, and I was like, got to a point where I was too young to be hanging out at their
Mhm.
level.
Mhm.
And my middle brother could kind of probably shouldn't have been always hanging out at the 3 year older brother level. They were like, I think, two like grades different, 3 year age difference in school. So they had some overlaps and they'd run around together. And they really were best friends for their entire lives. My brothers have a relationship of closeness through the time of Cody's death that is remarkable and beautiful and so sweet. And yeah, they were just like those kind of tried and true, like, brothers for life, like, have each other's backs. And so I was close with my brothers, but I was never going to have that same relationship that they
Right.
had. Um, and so, of course, then I got older and I'm in college and we, like, can hang out and we can do things together. We're, like, sort of on the same maturity level. And, like, we start to have more of that equal sort of footing in adult relationship at that stage in our life. Um, and probably, I'm in undergrad, towards the end of undergrad, when I start noticing, and I honestly, I don't have a great specific, like, detailed memory of my life, but I knew around that time I was aware of my brothers using and, like, certain behaviors that were problematic. And
Both of
um,
them were, or just Cody?
my middle brother,
Yep.
yeah, um, Cody. So it's like as that went on, and, like, then I'm kind of in grad school, I feel like it starts to become like life stuff starts not holding up as well. And, like, there start to become cracks in the foundation of things. And um, whether it's like money or relationships or jobs, like, those little things start to have the consequences. And it was just sort of like a progressive process of him struggling with substance abuse and addiction for really, I think, the rest of his life, with short periods of sort of intervention or trying to have sobriety, but never really being able to maintain or sustain that for very long. And so, I'd say probably if I'm 20, maybe, like, I'm 24 by the time it's kind of becoming more apparent, and he's 27, 27 to 37, those last 10 years is when it just kind of stays in one trajectory direction of, like, progressive, and more damaging to his life. And
Are
then
you are you
Mhm.
familiar with maybe the reasons that what triggered him into? I mean, especially as a trauma therapist, understanding that these substance abuse patterns are typically for wanting to soothe, right?
Mhm.
Are you familiar with what was going on with him that he felt he was
Mhm.
trying to, self-medicate
You
around?
know, I could have some kind of broad guesses.
Mhm.
We didn't have those conversations while he was living, and so I'd be really telling his story for him, you
Got
know?
it. Yep.
Um, and what I can kind of say with more certainty to give some picture is, you know, like, I think one, there was just exposure, like he was around kids as a teenager and people where that was there was more people using like weed and early and just like simple recreational stuff. So I think just classic more exposure than maybe other kids earlier in life. And the other thing that always struck me is like, I just think my brother is actually a pretty highly sensitive person.
Mm.
And I think that sensitive people often become addicts
Mm-hmm.
because they feel things very tenderly, very deeply, and very rawly. And without like real kind of like awareness and skills and understanding and support for those feelings, I think they just like don't know what to do with them. And so I think that is a basic thing that I think feels true about him in terms of like specific trauma wounds. I can't say for sure about that part of his
But it
story.
is very interesting. I mean, to talk about the sensitivity component
Mm-hmm.
too. That's probably something that a lot of people experience and don't put those two types of things together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm sorry I had interrupted you. I was
No.
curious. I was curious
Yeah.
about that though, because it's very interesting to me. And of course you've been someone who has, been in the forefront of teaching me this, but although I am sitting here thinking about Bobby's addictions class,
Mm-hmm.
and all the things that people go to
Mm-hmm.
addiction wise whenever they're
Yeah.
trying to soothe, then it's not just substance abuse.
Yeah.
Um, but from what I've learned from, some of the best people that I've had in my life is that these things are, I mean, yes, there is exposure, right? There is that potential for exposure and that could, and what else is going on, what's going on
Mm-hmm.
inside.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yep. All
Yeah.
right. So,
I mean, the part that you interrupted was really just kind of the culmination, like the climax of his addiction was that he eventually experienced an accidental overdose.
mm,
And the sort of catalyst of his body not being able to withstand was that fentanyl was
mm.
sort of the culprit in that, which is an incredibly common experience in our country.
How old was he when that happened?
He was 37.
So that was the one and only overdose, correct? Or he had an accidental and before the one that took his
He
life.
had what probably was would have been classified at least one overdose that I know he went to the hospital for, maybe a couple of years before that, and survived it. Um, and my oldest brother, who was, kind of they're still really connected a lot, even through his addiction, had told me that he had Narcaned my brother many times.
Wow.
And so he had experiences of probably near overdose um, progressively more, as it got worse over the years.
How did it make you feel being told that from your brother? I mean, what were the emotions and the thoughts,
Yeah.
and even, I mean, there was probably grief involved, I would think, by hearing that. I mean, did you feel helpless? Did you feel, like, did you rush to action? How did that make you feel when he would tell you that he
So
was using Narcan
he
on your brother?
I don't know. He didn't tell me that, I think, very long before my brother died. It may have been
I see.
a year or two before when we were kind of in more of a in-depth conversation about it, and he had mentioned it. So he wasn't telling me like when it was happening. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this happened last week. He was sort of like, in retrospect, like, this is something that has happened, over the last few years or something. And I mean, it just was at that point, I just wasn't surprised. There came a point in time where I was pretty sure my brother was going to die as a result of his addiction. And I think lots of people have different, experiences with that. Like, the sense of, do they think that someone's going to make it out or not? Can they accept that? Do they have an intuition about it? Like, there's a lot of things that play into that. Um, but for me, I felt that it was a really strong likelihood. And those were just sort of confirmations, I think, of that
Mm-hmm.
feeling that I had. And I mostly just, I act, I felt confirmation about the severity of Cody's addiction, and really sad and worried about my brother having to endure trauma like that.
Mm-hmm. Did you, was there, in hindsight, when your
About my
brother
older
told you
brother.
this,
Yeah.
right? In hindsight, when he was telling you this close to the time, did you have any thoughts around, did you, what ifs are so common, right? What ifs and grief and loss, all of that. Did you have any of this, these what ifs of if he would have told me there was something I could have done about it? Or did you think there could have been? And I know that's a dangerous rabbit hole that you can go down. And
Sure.
it's also good to be aware, I believe,
Sure.
of those thoughts and to work with them and work through them. So what was your experience in terms of knowing this, that all of that, saving, if you will, the Narcan experiences had been going on and you had no clue for those few years?
I mean, I think when I think about like my role and like the what ifs and um there was years before that, and like moments in the years leading up to the progression where I would sit down with myself and I would ask myself, I started to really actually have a very honest conversation with myself, which was, if my brother dies, what will I have wanted to do?
Mm.
Like, I really needed to answer that as best as I could in the here and now without actually knowing what that would feel like. Um, because I knew it was a likelihood and I really wanted to at least eradicate some level of misplaced guilt that I knew could come my way. And so I would really ask myself that question throughout, like, what will I have wanted to do? How will I have wanted to live? How will I have wanted to talk to him if he's not here anymore? And that grew with like my maturity and my own like sort of recovery work. I got more clear about that and more able to answer that from like a grounded place rather than like a scared place. um, as I was in my late 20s and 30s. So I was, 34 by the time he died, and probably in my, the last like 6 years, that question developed with some maturity behind it. And so I did things that I were important and I knew that I did with intention. Like, I did help him at certain times find treatment, when he was willing to do that. And I did write him letters about my concern and what I wanted for him, for his life, and that I cared about him and he deserved, to be healthy and to be well, and that addiction is not his fault and it's not something people choose, and that they need help for. Like, I really was wanted to communicate the things that I wanted to have said to him. And so I think that for me relieved some of the what ifs after his passing. Um, and like there's not like I'm a therapist, so I'm intentional about that. Doing the things I just said may not do that for everybody. Like, they may not
Right.
relieve that guilt for everybody.
Right.
But I think the pause and the reflection and the coming back to how will I live with me was the question that I needed to have safe voices and supportive people help me, reflect and answer, and that was a sort of resource that I could use.
That's awesome. And it's, you know, a lot of people can glean so much just from that statement, if it comes back to me, right? We sit in these situations and we think about, and that I am a prime example of this. We think about others and their well-being and fighting so hard, for an end result, and recognizing that I'm losing myself in the process. Um, to be able to share a story where you can say, I mean, and you did have some of the foresight, right? Where, there are some people who don't get the foresight
Yeah.
that it's here and it's gone.
Yeah.
But to be able to say, you know, coming back to myself, what can I say I did for myself? I think is not just something that is powerful in a lead up, but also in a wide variety of situations, abusive situations,
Yeah.
traumatic situations. Um, and, you know, I'm actually, if you're willing to just for a minute put your therapist cap on, because I know that there are a lot of people out there who are walking in shoes that don't understand. And let's actually do it around addiction, because you said something that was very, very important a minute ago. You reminded him that it was not his fault. The stigma for mental health, the stigma for, substance abuse, for a lot of things, we as a society look down on, right? Oh, well, you can't stop drinking and the drugs. And there's something that is um, lighting that fire, and it's a safety mechanism, it's a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
So for sake of talking about oneself and the idea that addiction or that these things are not your fault, can you, and please definitely bring examples of Cody in, because I want everybody to know about Cody. So feel free to use him as examples, but can you talk more about that self-care, that self-awareness, and the idea of addiction? And also too, maybe without that self-awareness, is there a way out of that addiction?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, as you were talking, and come bring me back if this doesn't answer your specific question, but where my brain was going is like the it's not our fault part. It makes me think about the addictions and the attachments work that,
Mm-hmm.
Bobby leads us in at Onsite. Um and I like to use the example of not drugs, like, because I think if you haven't been really close in, and even maybe like trained like I am, in a like academically, or been the person in it, it can be pretty mind bending to actually wrap your head around. And so I like to think about um, like something as simple as putting our phone down,
Mm-hmm.
which you have your own relationship with, but outside of the driving scope, right? Like, in my house, watching my TV, engaging in something else, if my phone is nearby and something lights up on it, my brain is so activated, with all of these stimulus chemically, that and it's going to almost feel impossible to not pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
And the lengths that actually most of us would have to go to alter that behavior are almost equal to what an addict addicted to heroin would have to do to stop picking up the phone. Like, I mean, I'm a therapist. I talk to my sleep is messed up. A client, tells me I'm not sleeping good, and I'm like, "Where's your phone when you go to bed?" Right, it's right
Uh-huh.
next to me, and I look at
Uh-huh.
it the whole time I'm laying there, and we know that's fires stuff off, and and I'm like, so could you put it, at a further away to
Right.
and it's the simplest thing, and people are like, it's not that easy. The way that our brains, our bodies, our psychological, whether it's both physiological and psychological, these attachments, these things that we just get hooked into doing reactively, instinctively, and we do them enough times that they are become like hardwire processes in our brain. And so that's not something that we're deciding from our prefrontal cortex.
Mm-hmm.
Those are behaviors that start coming from like biochemical and animal fight flight reactions and reward responses, like I need to eat right now. I'm hungry. I need to eat food. I'm feeling X in my body. I'm starting to feel a withdrawal of this particular substance. I need it just like I need water. It hijacks the brain in such a way. And actually, a lot of behaviors do that. And so I do think we can see our addictive nature. It's sort of the animal part of us, like the rats are going to keep going back, and getting it again and again. In all of us, and once something takes shape, once it's fixed in there, as a mechanism that works, that produces the result that in the immediate I want to have, we're sold on that biochemically. And it's going to take some serious intervention of that accessibility to that particular thing we reach for before we can just change the behavior.
Yeah, and that's something that that's such a good explanation and great information for people who are listening, because there is a lot of shame too that people put on themselves about, well, why can't I just stop? Well, I mean, Tara has just answered basically that exact question,
Yeah.
and that it's okay to have grace for yourself, and it's also your responsibility to do the work to change it. And what's interesting to me, especially in my experiences with residential, are I was guilty of this too, but walking away and thinking, for me, my first tour I was there for 8 weeks. And I remember walking away going, I just spent 8 weeks in residential trauma. I'm great. Life is solved. Everything that everything that was in my body and in my past is gone. And after, the trial, it went right back to where it was. So it's not something, and for people listening, it's not something that you can just put down. And you can also go and do the work. But if you don't continue to do the work, and then I still think it's a struggle, it's once you latch on to it, then, were you going to say something? Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of what I think. This is a helpful way to talk about what 12-step programs are actually trying to help people stay in connection with. I think they can get some misperception about the idea of saying, I am so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic, over and over. It's like, well, that's not who we are. But it's actually to the point of what you're describing. It's to say, I need to remember that I have this propensity that lives inside of me that actually doesn't disappear, even if I get some space in between it. I need to remember that these are my mechanisms. These are my protectors. These are my, fight, flight, freeze responses. They're not going anywhere. I just learn how to, manage them better, get more distance between them, have other options so that it's not my first choice. But that mechanism, it's in here. It's been downloaded, into the system. And that's, I think, the reminder of, this doesn't go away. So I just have to be a person who knows that about myself.
Absolutely. I mean, and I talk about that all the time. It's not like my grief and my story with OCD. I still have OCD and I manage it. Right. And I've done so much of the work that when I can tell that my mind is starting to ruminate or, is starting to go into any sort of like medical freak out health stuff. I mean, you've been through that with me. That is for sure. My health OCD. But it's not about curing, because it's always going to be with us. It's about learning how to manage and I'm
treat.
glad that treat. Yeah. Right. I mean, because I remember sitting with Tara whenever we were my second tour in residential and the whole OCD thing had come up, and I had just raged against that with my care team. And these are people that, I trust with my life, and they're sitting in this round circle with me and they're talking about OCD, and, my ego was just completely flamed. It was, scorched. And I was like, no, it's all trauma. It's all trauma, and that coming to accept it, right? Accepting was number one. But I remember sitting with Tara and talking about this program I was about to go into for the OCD and talking to her about the medication. Well, what if they want to put me on medication for it, right? And there's medication for a whole host of stuff, including addiction. And uh, I remember Tara, she told me a specific story. And she said, without this person being on these medications, they could not function as they are. You know, this is what was best for them, and they need it, and that's okay. So you bringing up the medication component, there's still such a stigma around that too, right?
Yep.
And it's
Yep.
you use appropriate medications, you know, as you need. And
Mhm.
ketamine still, for me, I still, you know,
Mhm.
it has done so much for me that I will, but some people still kind of look at me cross-eyed when I say I'm in ketamine treatment because it's not accepted. You know, people just think of it as a drug. So I'm glad you brought that up. So you were talking about Al-Anon.
Mhm.
And so you were in 12-step communities and Al-Anon. Were you in those? Did you join those before Cody passed, or was that something that happened after? You were there before. Can you
Yeah.
talk about those experiences and, you know, tell us how that helped you in the
Mhm.
process, both during his addiction and after he passed away?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really imagine having been able to, even with its challenges, stomach his passing without Al-Anon. Like, it was such a protective factor for my well-being, um, to encountering that kind of wound of him dying. Um, and so I started going when I was also an undergrad. And it kind of like ebbed and flowed with consistency over the years. You know, I would have times where I went a lot and really utilized that. I would have times where I'd take breaks and then I'd just go like once a month. I mean, it really just catered to what was I needing at the time and what were the stressors that I was dealing with it at the time. Um, and it it's just sort of amplified, I think, what I was also learning as a professional working, because I actually started working in addiction treatment when I was
Mm.
in undergrad and after. And so it was my first field of focus. And so having that insight and that exposure, it mirrored, I think, what I was learning, which is like, it's not your fault. You're powerless. You don't choose this. Nobody can just cure it and make it go away. There's something deeper going on that gets, you know, into the neurobiology and the psychology of our systems, which really being able to, from the outside looking in, see that a person struggling with substance addiction can't control it, it it completely changed my posture towards interacting with that person, towards understanding that person. It brings in sometimes empathy and compassion, sometimes just like a letting go, like, oh,
Hmm.
like, well, I'm not going to turn my wheels trying to change a thing that actually they can't just change on a dime. Like, it's deeper than this. Um, and so it's like, well, then how do I learn to live with that reality? And so I think what Al-Anon shows me and what it's helped me understand that I have a lot in common with the addict that is my loved one, which is we both, if we're going to live free from the turmoil of what addiction is, have to admit our powerlessness over it and turn it over and lean into something bigger than ourselves and the support of others and the healing of others and a power greater than ourselves. Like, that is what I need in order to live with the reality that this person is sick and I can't change it at all. I need all of that because that's a hard pill to swallow otherwise. The same sort of treatment plan is necessary for them in order
Hmm.
to live with, oh, I have this thing that is this sickness that I can't change. Um, I actually have to admit my powerlessness and let other people, let something bigger than me in. And um, so I think there was like a relating that came from being in the program too, that actually like helped me not see myself just as a person in relationship with an addict, but I kind of I think we're all addicts in some regard or another. Like, it's like what we were
Agreed.
saying before. We all reach for something compulsively to make us feel
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Right.
Um, and to perceive a sense of control when we don't have it. And so
Right.
that's what it is. And, it just depends on how severe the consequences and the destruction of it are, to whether or not we have to end up in rooms like, 12-step spaces or not, or
Mm-hmm.
treatment centers like, milestones or not. Um, but yeah, Al-Anon really helped me have a framework, and also just like a coming back to myself. I mean, Al-Anon is how do we don't they share about the addict, we share about ourselves. And so it's more of what we were talking about before, where it's like, I have to live with me. I'm the one that I have any agency over. And it helped me stay with that while also having an understanding about what the addiction really was.
And do you, in it, with your clients who aren't necessarily dealing with that situation? So,
Mhm.
I know you've many times, and I've maybe not done it yet. Although now would probably be the best time for me to do it. But Tara has been encouraging me for probably the last year to attend Al-Anon meetings, but not for addiction,
Mhm.
for other reasons. Can
Mhm.
you talk to, so people are going to hear this and they're going to say, oh, well, I don't have a substance issue. Can you talk to people about why it's important that
Yeah.
Al-Anon and the 12-step programs can be important for people going through um, a variety of things? Can you talk to why that's important? What that
Yeah,
offers them?
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I mean, so I think that it's still going to be written in the meetings in the language that it was written in the beginning. And so it's going to talk from the frame of actually very specifically alcoholism. It doesn't even say drug addiction in
Mm-hmm.
Al-Anon in the literature. But of course, everybody in there is a mixture of both. We realize they're all the same, And so, way I think about what Al-Anon actually supports is how to be in relation, helps us how to with caring for ourselves while in relationship with any kind of suffering outside of us that we can't control. And that's, I think everybody actually checks that box, that there
Mm-hmm.
is some suffering outside of them that they can't control, that is in the world around them, in a person around them. And here we are. What do we do with the powerlessness over the suffering or the illness of another? And how do we live with that? And how do we take, how find an okay or a peace or a serenity of some kind? And so, mental illness, I think any loved one with a mental illness, which addiction is, I think easily falls, you can easily kind of relate to all of the framework that comes in Al-Anon with its, oh, this is a mental illness, so is addiction. Here, I see how that's showing up in my life. It's something that's often recommended to therapists, actually, because we work with so many people who are sick and suffering that we can't control them, and it helps us stay in our lane with that. So, that's a common thing that therapists will use Al-Anon as their own support system for taking care of themselves, working with people who are hurting.
That's
Um,
interesting. I hadn't
yeah.
even, that's one area that I hadn't thought about. And you mentioned, like, with what's going on in the world, I know a
Mhm.
lot of people who
Mhm.
are suffering from
Yeah.
the weight of all of that, and don't know what to do with that energy,
Yeah.
right? They
Yeah.
don't know what to do. And
Yeah.
some of the people that I know are wanting to save the world, thinking that, doing something is saving
Yeah.
the world. And I'm like, no, all you have to do is plant a seed, right?
Mhm.
You have to plant seeds, use your voice. But that is a good reference for
Mhm.
things such as that. And that's
Yeah.
why, that's why I asked, because there's so many different examples of what it could do to support you. The Al-Anon meetings could do to support you in various different um, areas of
Yeah.
what's going on in people's lives.
Yeah.
So I know that I know your thoughts and your feelings about how your relationship with your brother didn't end just because he stopped being human on this earth. Tell me what those connections look like for you. And how have they changed? How did they start? How have they morphed? How have they changed over, the past 4.5 years?
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. I think about the sort of ambiguous loss that was happening before he died, where he's sort of here but not here. That's what drugs often do to a person. That there's parts of themselves that you can't access and you can't connect to. And in that, I think it was like where I started to have that kind of spiritual connection with him, even when I couldn't physically talk or relate or engage with him. So I feel like I was sort of I was like planting that seed already with the ambiguous um what's the word when you're expecting anticipatory
Yep.
anticipatory grief that was him in his addiction. And so I really think that seed was being planted there, where I was like, I still love him, he's still my brother. Like I didn't want to just, it wasn't as black and white as like I haven't seen him, so I don't feel, I guess he's gone.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so I do think there's something interesting about seeing how that showed up even before. And then once, his body leaves this earth, like I um already hold a belief system about connection to all living things, whether I see them or not, that allowed me to fall, like almost like thank God that I
Mm-hmm.
could fall into that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm thankful that wasn't something I had to create after, that it was something that I already had established in my own life and the way that I saw the world and had other experiences of loss. Um, and so, what that looks like, since his passing is it's saying little things to him in my head, just little talking, and it's anytime I remember him, to like anytime I literally think of him, it's that for me. It's looking at his picture, it's having a candle that is his candle and lighting it. It's I don't have like any like magical like, oh, he like, like had a, oh, I do actually I do have one really cool story with animals, where it was the January after his passing in September. I was in Hawaii on a vacation, and I I was thinking about him. I think the order was that like a song came, I was somewhere over the rainbow came on. I was on
Oh, uh-huh.
a whale like watch cruise. Like we were out
Mm-hmm.
looking to see if we could see some whales. And somewhere over the rainbow came on. I was just feeling a lot of feelings about him, like really connecting to him. And then a mama, a baby, and another female whale like started jumping out of the water, swarming our boat, like playing. The baby was just playing. It was insane. I mean, if you've seen a humpback whale in real life, it's insane. Number one, just seeing it. And I just, so that was a moment that was very spiritual to me. It was like, I was like, my brother gave me this gift right now. Like he
Mm-hmm.
just wanted me to know he's here with me.
Yep.
Um, and for the most part, the rest of it is, I think it's important to talk about like just basic ways that feel like it, because not everybody has like a deep spiritual, like easy access to that. And so it's, again, like I said, thinking about him, it's when people ask me, do I have siblings? I say, yes, I have two. Like that's a simple thing for me. That is, I am still connected to him. He still lives with me. I have two older brothers. Their name is Joshua and they're Cody. They're 3 and 6 years older than me. Like I didn't change that narrative. Um, if they want to ask about him, I will decide where I go with that depending on like the situation. Um, I'm pretty comfortable talking as I'm here, saying that, oh, yes, my middle brother, he passed away 4 years ago. But I don't start with that. I don't start, to me, it was important to keep that story what feels like I still feel, which is I still feel like he's my brother. I have
Oh
two.
yeah, and he is. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
one thing that has been a constant conversation in our story is how many kids do you have? Well, I have 3.
Hmm.
Just because
Yeah.
Logan passed away
Yeah.
doesn't mean he's a was.
Yeah.
My son would be almost 19.
Yeah.
He'd be a freshman in college. It's not,
Yeah.
oh, well, I just have 2 kids. I just have 2 girls, and that's the one thing I really do think that it's that idea right there of putting the was and is into perspective that keep people from being able to walk alongside you because they see people as, or they see these loved ones as a was, or
Yeah.
can have the potential to,
Yeah.
when all we want them to do is see them as an is.
Yeah.
And by us being okay with the conversations of the is and still integrating, their characteristics and qualities in human form,
Mhm.
that allows people. I mean, we just want to talk about our loved ones. We don't want to shy away from them. And the idea that they are an is so very important. And, creating that conversation for people to be able to say, oh, okay, I don't know. I don't know your experience. I don't know what you're, feeling, but tell me about your brother. Tell me
Mhm.
about your son. Instead of just being like, oh, hey, did you see what's in the news today? Because I would be like, no, because I'm doing my best to stay aware, but not go deep into the trenches of that.
Yeah.
That's for sure. That's a
Yeah.
whole other conversation, though. So very importantly, in your experiences of having and loving and supporting and grieving a brother who, passed away because of, accidental fentanyl overdose,
Hmm.
or anybody who is suffering from whether in process of substance addiction or, have lost someone to it.
Yeah.
What I hate the word advice, so I'm not going to use what encouragement, right? That's a big no-no in the trauma field. We don't give advice. We give encouragement. What encouragement would you give to people who are listening, who are, maybe going through the same thing or potentially will someday? What would you want them to hear from your story, from your experience?
The one that is always the most important is you're not alone.
Mm.
I think that
Even though you feel like it.
you know that, right? You know how powerful that realizing is. And I think that's probably the encouragement that comes the first to mind is like, you've got to find your community to walk this with you, to walk the living with someone, who is in active addiction, to walk the living with someone who's trying to recover or living a
Mhm.
recovered life with an active
Mhm.
addiction, because that becomes a whole different, response team. um, and to walk the potential of losing someone as a result of their untreated addiction. And that piece for me is not just Al-Anon. While that's a huge, it's like a shortcut to those people. I'll tell you that. But it's also the people who are just my closest people, and really holding hands, and it was calling people and saying, I need you to come. I need you to
Mhm.
come. I need you to come. I
That is
can't.
such a vulnerable thing to do too, because
It's the most vulnerable thing to
uh-huh.
do.
It's hard for me. I mean, even when I was in
Yeah.
residential trauma, it was hard for me
Yeah.
to ask
Yeah.
for help.
Yeah. It was the most resourceful saving thing that there was. Like, I think that tends to sort of be the calculation, right? That the things that are the most vulnerable and the hardest to do have the greatest impact on us most of the time. And that's true even for this kind of thing, which is like, will you please come? I don't know what I need from you, but to feel a body next to me, it does something to us. It's the reason I'm a therapist, right? I'm not out there handing out answers. You've
She
probably
doesn't. No,
been
she does not. No.
frustrated at that many times, right?
I have never been frustrated with you. Let's put that down. But yes, you have challenged me numerous times to to work through it
Yeah.
for me instead of being told.
But it's just knowing that there's someone in this stuff with me, right? That I have some kind of mirror or a hand to hold, or just love, that I have love with me in the journey. So the encouragement is definitely like the hardest thing in the world is building intimate supports, and it doesn't have to be 10 people. It can be 2, and that will be meaningful if you use them. I think it's just the other pieces are like permission for your way of coping, of walking whatever side of that path is, to change, because what's right for us and what we need at a certain point in time changes as we change, as life changes, as circumstances change. So at the beginning, at certain points, people need hard boundaries. Like, I can't, right? Like, I can't even be around this person. It's like I lose myself, right? And I lose all my groundedness. And okay. And maybe that changes over time. And so that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. If you open back up space and you find a way to regulate by also having some connection, or vice versa, like whatever the plan of what supports me with where I am, I think we can get fixed in like, this is the way to do it. But life is much more of a journey than that, and it's always evolving. And so if people needed to start when they lost someone by saying, I have one brother, because they weren't ready to talk about what happened, that's okay. And you get to change. Maybe you find your way to incorporating that loss and that relationship with words that are from healing rather than from the open wound. And so I think that feels important, like the permission to change how we do it,
And it's very important. And, unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people give themselves the grace and the time to recognize that they are worth all of that, and to be open-minded enough. I think one of the things that has been most important that I've learned along this process is that, because like I mentioned before, when I was, in residential with you the first time, I walked away, and I remember actually talking to Ian and saying, what happens if I leave and I haven't cured myself? I'm not cured, right? And Ian was like, that's not what this is for. It is to build a foundation. And for me, I heard it.
Yeah.
But I didn't hear it. I was like, no, it's time. I want to be okay. I want life to finally be okay. And over time, as things would pop back up, or I'd go through this again, or I'd go through that, it's, going through that OCD spiral when I was, with you guys the second time was totally unexpected for me. Cause I remember talking to Christopher on the phone going, before I went back up, I remember going, but I've already been there once. I shouldn't be suffering. I shouldn't be having another break. Well, I don't like to call it breakdown, but my nervous system was hijacked, right? This shouldn't be a thing. I was at milestones. And the more I've done this work, the more I've recognized all of these things still exist in my life. And so I may kind of like climb the hill to one of them, but then there's something that's still going to be on the other side. Like I was telling you the other day, for the first time, or since last November, I'm actually doing in-depth EMDR with an EMDR specialist. in allowing myself to go into my childhood wounds with my father and how, those developed, how I showed up and participated in other relationships and, um, you know, moving forward up until recently. And, it's that idea, it's keeping aware that these things are, like you said, always going to shift, and having space to allow yourself to accept them when they do, And so, um, I hear all the things, for sure, all the things, and I do believe there are going to be people listening to this who are going to find great value on a wide range of topics that you've discussed. Is there anything, before we wrap up, is there anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to touch on, or any specific extra encouragement you have for others?
No, I might,
Speechless. Look at you. I left you speechless.
well, it's usually that I have too many thoughts, actually.
Oh, that's fair.
I just can't figure out which one to say. Um, well, I'm thinking about the thing you started with, which is I worked with you around intimate traumatic loss after having experienced my own, and I'm wondering, I'm just thinking it is an interesting perspective to have of how does as this professional personal self, and I don't know how much people get to hear clinicians talk about that, and it's a finesse that I think there's some things maybe I want to say about that. Of course, I'm a person, so everything I experienced informs all that I do, including my work as a therapist. We bring our stories into the room too. We're taught to try to keep them back here and to hold yours as a blank slate that we're just really curious about. How do you hold that? How do you hold that? How do you experience that? What does that mean for you? We're just meant to be really clean mirrors for you to see yourself more and more clearly. That's kind of the most simplified role of a therapist. And so I think self-disclosure as a therapist is a tool. It's a tool that we use just like direct confrontation or challenging or experiential in EMDR. It's a tool. It's like, how do I pull up, or reflective, listening. It's a tool. So how do I pull out? We use that tool with a lot of sensitivity and thoughtfulness and carefulness, the tool of self-disclosure as therapist. And there's not a lot of clients that know about these particular experiences in my life. Like you said, you didn't know about it until later. And that is something that, there isn't like a magic recipe about how and when I do that. When it feels like the tool that I sense in my tool belt that might actually offer the client something in their experience of trying to process, of heal in their work, then I will pull that tool out and I'll use it in a really intentional way. And there's no, I don't know a better way to get into the details of that than to say that, but I want to say that, one, it has made me a better grief therapist. Grief is something that I think that I really care a lot about working with people on, and I feel really comfortable digging in. And I think that insight I get to bring that in a special way, whether I'm naming it through self-disclosure or not. And when I do potentially have, small moments of self-disclosure, again, it's if that feels like a thing that a client might need to know about the world, or about a sense of safety in the room, right? Like, hey, I'm a person who knows an experience like this.
Mm-hmm.
And can your system maybe actually co-regulate with having that across from you right now? And so I think I just wanted to give a little bit of a voice to that.
No, I
element.
think that is great. And, after I had learned that about your brother, I was able to, it just so, and people have heard me talk about this, but I'm going to say this now for everyone to hear. But you have done so much for my life, and I hold such a special place in my heart, and it will always be there for you, even if we're not actively working together in the moment, because I know you'll always be there. I mean, if I need you, I know that I can call you. So you, for me, feels like that community component that, you're talking about, because it is very hard for me for someone to say, what can I do for you? And I'm like, I don't know. Just be here and check in on me. And thank you for sharing space, even though I don't know what that means. But I've had to learn that, right? I've had to learn, and I'm still not very good at it. But you are a remarkable human, and it shows through your work with clients. Because I know others who have worked with you, and their same thoughts and feelings. But to do what you did with me in that session on September 15th of 2022, that allowed me to take a massive step forward in my life. Now, it's not like I didn't take steps back, because I still ended up back in residential trauma after the trial, but it allowed me to actually go to the trial. There was a client who was there the second time I was there, and she goes, I was so full of shame that I was back in residential. And she said, well, it would make sense that you would bookend the trial with residential trauma. And that was extremely helpful. But I just want to publicly thank you for being that person for me, that I know that if regardless of whatever, I can reach out. And I know that that you are going to help me, and not because you are empathic, and knowing about your brother has allowed me to understand. I mean, it does change you in a way that allows you, I think, a different perspective as you're working with your clients, for sure.
Yeah.
And one last thing about that is, so what I also didn't know while I was there the first time, so your brother passed away on September 30th. And on Logan's Angel Day while I was there in 2022, so it was it was just 2 weeks shy of your brother. And you and Ian had put together that fire ceremony where I burnt the letter, and I actually still have the container. It's in, I have like a little space with stuff of Logan, and it sits there. It's very humbling to me that was an important thing for you to allow me to do on that day, when I can only sit across from you right now and imagine what you were feeling, knowing that in just a couple of weeks, and right, it's a day, right? We all know, we talk about it. We're like, it's a day, or, it's just this or that, but it's in our bodies. Those days, those specific dates live in our bodies. So I thank you. I am very grateful for you for holding that space for me when I know that you were going through your own shit, and that had to have been extremely, extremely hard. So I thank you for all of it.
Yeah.
Forever and ever. Amen.
You're welcome. And I think that when we're, doing our work with clients from our own sort of more of a healed place, which I had, it's been a process. It was early, but it wasn't a couple months after his passing. And I think opportunities like the work that I've done with you, or other things that I may have similar wounds to my clients, there's a real gift to me to get to be, to my wound, to my grief, to get to be a part of a moment for somebody else to have an experience of healing around that. And so to me, there's a divinity in that was also there for me.
I believe that. I mean, because we heal in helping, right? I mean, I've known for a long time. It's I was going to find a certain component of healing in my journey by helping other people. And, when this came about, this has done
Yeah.
so much, and I'm so excited for it. And so I can kind of relate in a different manner. I don't have a piece of paper, but
we all do our we're communal people. So
That's
yeah,
right.
we're all taking care of each other one way or another.
That's right. Beautiful to end this. We're all taking care of each other one way or another. I have so much enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for stopping by and sharing
Can
your
I
experience.
share one
Absolutely.
thing as a close? That is a good close, but I think I'd like
That
so
is a good close, but you use the word but. You're the one who taught me. Thank you. Everybody listening right now, she's the one that taught me to use and she just said but.
She is still a human with imperfections.
You are.
Just like you. I would love if I could have the opportunity to close this conversation by sharing the eulogy that I shared at my brother's service. Because we talked a lot about his sickness, and this shares some of the rest of him with people. And so I'd love to close with that if that sounds
I would love for you to close with it. Please do.
one of the greatest honors of my life was being able to speak at my brother's funeral service. And so I can't think of a better way to love a person in a moment like that. So I started with saying, if you're like me, then thinking about Cody in the most recent sense might be a pretty complicated and even painful thing. His struggle with the disease of addiction certainly made it so, especially because, like any untreated illness, it only worsens with time. So these last few years only seem to take us and him further and further away from the real Cody. So I'd like to help us remember. My brother Cody was as good as they come. His heart was almost too tender. Sometimes I think it's part of what made the realities of life seem like too much for him to bear. But that loving tenderness he led with sure did sweeten my life to a degree that I will carry and cherish forever. Cody was big love. When I think about Cody, I can feel his hugs and his kisses on my cheek or forehead. I loved that he was so open with his affection. He was a hard worker. I'd say we all come by that honestly in my family. I can see him in a dirty work shirt and pants, down on the ground, dirtying his hands and fixing something, fixing almost anything, it seemed. And he'd especially love to do it for you. He had a humility about him like that. Then, as my mom put it, before he left the house for anything other than work, he'd maybe have a freshly ironed button up with an undershirt, a crisp pair of jeans, icy white tennis shoes, a necklace, maybe a bracelet or a ring, and cologne. I definitely learned how to keep a pair of shoes like new from both of my brothers. I think about how he loved the goofiest comedies like Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, Seinfeld, or Billy Madison. And he could recite every word of them, and with the great theatrics too. I can see him laughing and making me laugh. I can see him overanalyzing something to the point of driving whoever he's talking to crazy with a smile on his face. He just loved to think deeply about life and was always eager to learn. I can see him being an absolute grump. Since unfortunately we can't blame that one on the addiction. Since we were kids, he had an irritable mood he could slide into. And if you were my brother Joshua, you would instigate it to get a real rise out of him for your own pleasure. Cody loved really hard. I bet if Cody ever loved you in this room, you know it without a doubt that he loved you forever. And even yet, I've never seen Cody love anything so much until he became a dad. If you saw any of their pictures, you saw how bright his face shined when he was with his son. At his best, Cody would cuddle, kiss, play on the floor, and totally immerse himself into kids' little world. there was something special about kids and dogs too that I think allowed him to be so freely loving and loved. All of this and so much more that just can't be put into words is why no matter how much of a pain in the ass he was to us, the true Cody that we knew and loved is why we made it to this room right now. Thank you, all of the people that were there, for that. I feel confident in speaking on Cody's behalf when I say, to those who loved Cody at his best or his worst, thank you. Because loving someone as sweet as Cody at his best, that's mostly a gift to us. But loving someone at their worst, that's the love of God.
Breathe. Take a big breath. Like I'm across from you now. That was beautiful. And thank you for sharing Cody with us. What a huge, huge, bright soul, right? And is, not was. I appreciate
Thanks for the opportunity and
absolutely
the space that you make here for the important, tender, often put away parts of our lives to get to be taken off the bookshelf and celebrated or honored or seen in such an important way. I'm thankful for what you're doing, and I'm thankful that I got to be a part of it.
I'm so happy that you were. I'm thankful for you. And hopefully if you're listening to the podcast, you're not like critiquing me whenever I'm talking, because you're the one that I have in the back of my head. And I'm going, did I say this wrong? Is she going to hear it and be like, no, you were incorrect. And I'd be like, listen,
No.
I'm not a therapist. I just play one on TV.
I'm not critiquing you. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So much love to you. All right. So thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode. And we would love to hear your thoughts, your feedback. You can send us an email at hello@traumauncensored.com. Definitely there will be reels coming out as well with Tara's wise words of wisdom and hope throughout the episode. And once again, I will put all of her contact information in the show notes below. So check those out if you would like to contact Tara. So until next time, again, thank you, Tara. And we'll see everyone later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.